let's come back to app controller. All right. So now we have the app controller. We're going to start the app up, and then we're going to go to routing. Okay. Yeah, the rest is just standard. So if we go to the counter controller, first thing you'll know, well, let me show you counter view and highlight. At the top, there is no app page directive, okay? Because counter controller has it. Now, there's no at page because in reality, it compiles down to a class with a route attribute. So this is the same thing, but this controller now owns the concept of its route. And so we put that on the controller because that's a decision. That's behavior, all right? Controller component base, counter view, that's all it takes to make counter view the default view for the counter controller. And then you see these are regular Blazor methods, and there is a handle for application heartbeat. Why is handle there? How does it get? That's where this iListener of application heartbeat is. Okay, iListener, that's all it takes. However, we do need to register counter controller with the bus. So where does that happen? We are going to go, just so you know, bus is part of the framework. We're going to go down again and look at, no, it's not here. Look at MVC component base. Right here, we have a property that gets injected that is IUI bus. And then at the very beginning of the life cycle, right here on initialized, we call bus.register this. Okay. So we're using the built-in dependency resolution, the I services collection. And because we have a hierarchy, we have a property where if I was to say base.bus, boom, it's there. It's injected, property injection. And I can get listeners of a certain type, but most of the time I'm just going to say notify. And I'm going to notify of a certain class. Okay. So that's how any controller can notify any other controller that's alive on that particular page just by saying bus.notify. So we don't have to have parents talking to a child, which is talking to another child, by embedding a UI bus, a user interface bus, and having it available to every controller. All any controller has to have is say bus.notify a particular object of whatever you want, and literally every other controller that's on the call stack that's alive on that particular page is going to get a chance to have its handle method called if it just implements the interface for that particular type. All right, so that's important. Now let's go down to the fetch data controller. I've looked at counter controller enough. Let's see, home. Yeah, fetch data controller. Bing. Okay. Fetch data controller is right. No, fetch data controller. This is the parent. All right. And if you're familiar with the application template, you know that we get from JSON. And in my opinion, no user interface class should be calling outside of the application to another computer. This is sample code. Even this code should be part of your model or a domain service. All right, but either way, on view forecasted day selected. All right, so I added this. Yeah, I added this on the first column. On click of this forecast day selected forecast, and that is going to be an action callback of weather forecast. And so if we go back, we see that we have set the action view.callback equals this method. Okay, so when I click, we're going to save off the selected forecast. We're going to notify that there was a forecast selected for anybody else. Then we are going to effectively create a Blazor component right here. Fragment Builder is part of Blazor MVC, and it allows you to pass it. This is another little bit of complicated Blazor code. It allows you to pass in the type of a Blazor component, in this case, our controller, because controllers are Blazor components. And we're going to get the render fragment, and essentially set it here in this part of the child. And so this is a way to really easily create a Blazor component, pass in, and pass in, whatever you want to pass in, the selected forecast. And of course, forecast day is part of forecast day controller. And forecast day pane, again, is in the view. So let me show you that. Forecast day pane, and we are displaying it right there. Okay, so that's that. And then forecast day controller, we're creating it. And again, it's a controller component base. It doesn't have a route attribute because it's not meant to own a page. It has a forecast day view. It has a property that we just set called forecast day. And we're basically setting a property on the view. Notice that this also has eye listener of heartbeat. And so we're just setting that. And so forecast day view, very simple. The forecast day view of the summary, and then last heartbeat timestamp, which is getting updated all the time. So we go back here, click on it, freezing, and now it's updating. Now let's go to this add another child. This, I'm clicking, see the scroll bar, see how many I click, and they're all independent. Everyone is independent because of this framework. So let's go and look at that. All right, so inside index, all right, that's the index page. Here's the button for add another counter, and we're just calling this method, okay? All right, there we go. And by the way, the loop is however many we had, and fragments is a list of render fragment. In Blazor, you have to, if you're familiar with past frameworks, WinForms, WPF, ASP.NET MVC, just better, there's been this concept of controls or elements. So translate in your head, when you see render fragment, think child controls, think child elements, okay? Just do that translation in your head. Render fragment is a child control to this one, okay? Or it's just a control, and you can use them as children. All right, so we have render fragment, child controls, or child components, and we're going to add a new one. So fragments.add, or you're going to use the same one, fragment builder, get render fragment. This, I mean, this could be translated to say, just in your head, you could, if you're familiar with the past frameworks, think this dot controls dot add. Okay. All right. And so render fragment counter controller, and it's going to be a brand new one that gets constructed by the Blazor framework. And every time I click, it's going to be new one. That's it. Every other behavior is part of counter controller. The counter controller, through its base class, is registering itself with the UI bus and is initializing itself with the current count, is handling its own event application heartbeat events, and is its own thing. And it doesn't care about its parent. It literally, the parent didn't pass in any parameters to it. So it, as it's living, doesn't really know who its parent is and doesn't care. Whereas back on fetch data, this one, because it did receive something from its parent, has a method of calling back directly if that's appropriate, but still it's depending on what you want to do. And then add another child. And in the same way, because you have added the child, and you have kept it in a collection, if you wanted to remove the child, you have it in a collection. So list of render fragment dot remove. Simple as that. Okay. All right. So that is walkthrough of the code.